Hey there, friends. I hope everybody's doing well. All right, let's dive into a story about why the US dollar has been losing value for over a century and how things may have been different if we'd have been using something like Bitcoin. All right, the US dollar, once a rock-solid symbol of wealth, has been shrinking in value for over 100 years. I mean, you could buy a loaf of bread for a nickel back in the day. And now, good luck getting change for a $5 bill for the same loaf of bread. And this didn't happen by accident. It's a result of three big events, each one building on the mistakes from the one before, like a house of cards that just keeps getting shakier. Let's break it down. First up, 1913. That's when the Federal Reserve was created. A private central bank given the power to control the United States money supply. Before this, the government issued its own currency, but the Fed changed that, letting a private institution print money and set interest rates. Why was this a bad move? Well, our founding fathers warned us about this kind of thing. I mean, Thomas Jefferson said, quote, "If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless." End quote. Pretty intense. Ben Franklin wasn't a fan either. He thought that giving the bankers control over the money was a recipe for absolute corruption. The problem with the Fed is it can print money out of thin air, which sounds great until you realize it dilutes the value of every single dollar in your pocket. That's the seed of our troubles, and it was planted in 1913. Fast forward to 1944, and we hit the second big event, the Bretton Woods Agreement. After World War II, the world needed a new financial system, and the US dollar was crowned the world reserve currency. What does that mean? Well, basically, other countries agreed to peg their currencies to the dollar, and the dollar was backed by gold at 35 cents an ounce. It sounds stable, but here's the catch. Being the world's reserve currency meant the U.S. had to keep printing dollars to meet global demand. This led to something called the Triffin dilemma. It's a fancy term, but it just means the U.S. had to run high trade deficits, spending way more than it earned just to supply the world with dollars. So the dollar, instead of real manufactured items, were America's biggest export. That put pressure on the gold reserves because there wasn't enough gold to back those dollars. It was like writing checks you know you can't cash forever. This setup made the dollar vulnerable, and it relied on the Fed's ability to print money, which, as we know from 1913, wasn't exactly a great foundation. Then comes 1971, the third big event, and this one is the kicker, the Nixon shock. President Nixon decided to ditch the gold standard entirely, meaning the dollar was no longer backed by gold. It became what we call fiat currency, just paper that government says is valuable with nothing tangible behind it. This was the death knell for the dollar's stability. Why? Because now the Fed could print as much money as they wanted, and boy did they. The U.S. was already printing dollars to keep up with its role as the world's reserve currency, and now without gold holding it back, it was like giving a kid a credit card with no limit. Today, the U.S. has to keep printing money just to pay the interest on its massive debt. Over $37 trillion and counting. That debt exploded because being the world's reserve currency encouraged overspending, and the Fed's control made it easy to print more to cover those bills. Each dollar printed makes ones you hold worth less. That's why your groceries keep getting pricier. Now, what if we'd been on a Bitcoin standard this whole time? Bitcoin's a decentralized, deflationary money, and it changes everything. Let's go back to 1913. If we were using Bitcoin, there would be no Federal Reserve. because Bitcoin doesn't need a central bank. It's run by a network of computers following a strict protocol, not by bankers making decisions behind closed doors. The Founding Fathers would have loved the idea of money that no one can control or manipulate. Bitcoin's supply is capped at 21 million coins, so you can't just print more when you feel like it. That would have stopped the inflation train before it even left the station. Let's jump to 1944 and the Bretton Woods Agreement. A Bitcoin standard would have made that agreement impossible. Why? Bitcoin is decentralized. There's no government or bank that can decide to make it the world's reserve currency or peg other currencies to it. Plus, its deflationary nature means the value tends to go up over time as demand grows and supply stays finite. Countries would not want to peg their money to something that's constantly increasing in value. It'd make their own currencies unstable. The Triffin dilemma? It doesn't apply. No one country could overspend to supply the world with Bitcoin because no one controls it. The whole Bretton Woods system would have collapsed before it even started. Finally, 1971. On a Bitcoin standard, the Nixon shock wouldn't have even been a thing. Bitcoin doesn't need gold or anything else to back it. Its value comes from the network and the protocol. It's like digital gold, but better, because it's secure, it's transparent, and it can't be manipulated by a single government. You wouldn't need to depeg Bitcoin from anything because it's already its own standard. Governments would be forced to live within their means, and the money's value wouldn't be eroding year after year. The debt spiral we're in now, it wouldn't exist because you can't print Bitcoin to pay off the debt. Governments would be forced to be So, wrapping it up, the dollar's decline comes from a chain reaction. The Fed's creation in 1913 gave the bankers control over our money. Bretton Woods in 1944 turned the dollar into the world's piggy bank. And the Nixon shock in 1971 cut the last tether to reality. Now we're stuck printing money to pay for debt, and every dollar loses a bit more value. Bitcoin would have stopped this mess at every step. Its decentralization and fixed supply would have kept things honest. It's like the difference between a game with fixed rules everyone follows and one where someone keeps changing the rules just to win. That's the story of the dollar and why something like Bitcoin could have kept our money strong. Thank you for listening. Make sure you like and subscribe, and please share this video if you can. I'll talk to you next time. Thank you.